Okay, well, these are the ruins that have been excavated from Qumran up till now. Some have been built up, but as you see from the start back there, you have a ritual immersion pool, which I can mention more about as we proceed here. Another ritual immersion pool with steps. Here is a huge cylindrical cistern that must have held thousands of gallons of water. And as we go along here, we'll see cistern after cistern. The cisterns were the raison d'etre of this community. Here, for instance, are more water channels. There's another huge cistern with steps. And probably the biggest cistern of all is, I think you'll see it right over here anyway. But the point of the water, and this is what's so amazing in a dry climate like this, is that you have the waterfall up on the mountain up there, where you can see its dry outlines, and that hardly ever runs water. But several times a year, suddenly you get a huge flood from the Bethlehem Plain. The water comes rolling down through the water channels, which are carved by hand through those rocks over there, dammed up there, and slowly led down through this water channel here and stored in these cisterns. So the cisterns, the complicated water channel, the aqueduct as it is specified here, are the raison d'etre of this community. Now here is a very huge water cistern or bathing pool. As you see, it has steps in it, and some of the smaller ones have the outline of what was called a Jewish mikveh. That would be an actual Jewish immersion bath. So this is certainly, there are too many cisterns here. That's the big cistern I was talking about there, right behind you. You see, it's a huge, huge cistern of vast dimensions. This is very bizarre in a dry area like this. We have to admit that this is what we would normally call in Christian apocryphal literature, or the literature of the church fathers about the sects. This is a daily bathing group, a Homero-Baptist group. If you want to call them Essenes, some might want to call them Ebionites, the poor, the name of James's community. Some might want to call them Nazareans, after what we think of Jesus Christ, or John the Baptist followers. But whatever we have here, we have a bathing community in a very odd place. It's been my question sometimes what they did in that dry year, whether they were able to fill these cisterns enough to get enough water to do these bathing activities in an annual basis. I think sometimes this was an uninhabitable place. But on the whole, these installations are big enough and impressive enough to allow us to imagine a really functioning daily bathing community, people bathing in the morning when they got up in a ritual manner, and after any kind of impurity. Behind you there, I'll start here now. Behind you there is what has been argued over a lot. That, as you see, is a very sturdy bastion-like tower. And the question has been, is it just a lookout tower? Is it just the center of the community for looking around, which is, this community, as you see, is very strategically located. You look down the road here, and you can see the whole way down towards the oasis of En-Gedi, and further the famous stronghold of Masada, the road along going south, the Dead Sea. And to the north, the Jericho Plain. But what about this tower here? Was it just to look out? There's been a huge argument about this, mostly led by Professor Norman Golb of the University of Chicago. And Professor Golb's point was that this was a defense tower. Others argued with him. The peaceful Essene people said, what do they need? A defense tower? These are peaceful Essenes contemplating the meaning of God in a retiring anchorite way in the wilderness. I think on the whole, Professor Golb's got the better of the point. That looks tough enough to be a defensive tower. One last point I would like to point out, the California State University Long Beach Judean Desert Exploration Project started out here under my tutelage around 1987. And we started just by doing surveys, and we were the first to bring a radar ground scan to this area, which we are now continuing in here, 2004, 12 to 14 years later, because of bureaucratic and other sorts of difficulties that emerged in the meantime. But we found that this is not complete, that in that area over there is a very large network of more underground waterworks of different kinds. And we found signatures with the radar past where those rocks are and near where those people are sitting under the awning there of a lot more ruins. We also did a radar ground scan under the tower or around the tower, and we found indications of some sort of circular well, some kind of stone object with a circular signature that had not been uncovered. And as you see, 14 years later, because of the bureaucratic competition and intricacies of internecine strife that goes on over these projects, it's still not touched. Is that all right? Mm-hmm. And I'd like to... Don't bother with that sign. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Prof.
Yeah, okay. Ready?
Uh-huh.
Okay, what you see before you is a typical immersion pool. It's a quasi-cistern, but you see it has steps. Steps not only for cleansing, but also steps for people to go down in it and immerse themselves in a ritual purification manner. And if you look at the documents, particularly the community rule, you'll see that this was something that was required of the community members on a daily basis. That's why we called groups like this, and they weren't just here. They were all across northern Syria into northern Iraq, down into southern Iraq. There's, even today, in southern Iraq, a group functioning called Mandans. Saddam Hussein wiped them out. They were down in the marshes, and they still wore white linen clothes like priests. They called themselves Nazariah or Nazareans. The Arabs called them the Subba of the marshes. Subba means bathing, and they were ritual daily bathers following John the Baptist to the very day, the 21st century, in southern Iraq. So we had these bathing groups all across the Fertile Crescent in this period, and these were daily bathers. And I think what we're calling Essenes here at Qumran are connected to this whole movement of ritual purification going on from the Dead Sea here in Palestine all the way across northern Iraq down to southern Iraq, finally in the Subba of the marshes. Things like Manichaeism also grew out of this, and out of Manichaeism, Christianity grew out of this for sure. Manichaeism grew out of this, and out of Manichaeism grew Islam.
Manichaeism being?
A missing link. Well, Mani was a member of a daily bathing group in southern Iraq in the 200s, and the only thing I got to get it right because sometimes it's in my book, James, but Mani actually grew out of this in the 200s. He's a member of what we call an El-Kazaite group. El-Kazai means hidden power. It's an Aramaic word. It comes from Palestine somewhere in the 1st century and 2nd century. These groups spread again into northern Iraq. Many of them claim to be followers of John the Baptist. The Mandans in southern Iraq follow John the Baptist to this day. And Mani came from one of these families, and the only thing he changed was the food regulations and the way of purification. For Mani, you didn't have to bathe all of the time. You could clean yourself with sand and things of that kind. And those sort of rituals, Mani saw himself as a seal of the prophets. He spoke about a continuum of prophets down to him. Well, this is what Muhammad does in the Quran. What happened is that Muhammad, in the 5th and 6th centuries, encountered these Manichaean groups in southern Iraq. Muhammad encountered these Manichaean groups in southern Iraq, and out of that came his idea of the seal of the prophets, with slight variations from what Mani had been doing earlier. But Manichaeism runs at that time all the way into Persia, followed the whole Silk Road into China. It was a thriving movement for 4 or 5 centuries before Islam crushed it.
All based around water and purity?
Well, started with this El-Kazite movement. The El-Kazites in the early Christian texts follow this leader called the Righteous One or the Pure One. Probably is also related to the Qatar movement in southern France, because they call themselves the perfect and the pure ones. All these movements we don't have documented that well, but they're all involved in one way, or spin-offs or variations on the same theme, being purity, and practicing purity in a certain way. And of course, at Qumran, the Dead Sea Scrolls, we have the mother lode of the purity-conscious people. In the New Testament, to be fair, we have the mother lode of the anti-purity conscious people, because the whole thing of the presentation, and I call it a presentation of Jesus, is to show him as dispensing with the purity laws, saying you are not known by the food that goes into your mouth, that just goes out the body into the toilet bowl. You're known by what comes out of the mouth. Very clever rhetorical expositions and flourishes, repartees of that kind. But basically those were taken as dispensing with the purity regulations. You know, Jesus is pictured as sitting in the New Testament, and I say pictured because I don't credit these historical pictures of a Jewish Messianic leader. He's pictured as sitting with tax collectors who would have been considered totally unclean, people of various physical disabilities, people with running blood who can't control their periods, things that would have horrified Jews. Jews have a horror of people in their periods anyway and set them aside and won't have sexual intercourse with them in those times. Jesus, all the lame, the lepers, everything that is a banned person in the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Gospels is pictured as someone Jesus received, in particular prostitutes. Prostitutes is a total bugaboo at Qumran, and they mean by prostitutes fornicators. And they would have included by fornicators not the Maccabean family, which we were discussing at another point, but the Herodian family, because for the people at Qumran here and for John the Baptist, the Herodian family were little more than fornicators and prostitutes because of their marital habits and their odd behavior of marrying their close relatives and all marrying their nieces, and their divorce and polygamy practices.
Right.
You have a complete thought and someone comes in who, is throwing their brain waves, and you're answering their brain waves, and your thought is evaporated.
Okay, good to go here.
Okay, ready?
Uh-huh.
So what you see here is an actual shot of Cave 4 from across the Wadi, this being the promontory where the settlement ruins were dug first by DeVoe and now by a lot of us others. Down there we'll go momentarily to the graveyard. But here is a great shot of Cave 4, and we call these marls. These are a mixture of mud and limestone. They're not pure rock, they're marls. And that cave there with the entrance you see, one from the top and one from the side, is Cave 4. The second part of it is on the other side of it. It has an equally open chamber. Originally the two seem to have been connected, but it seems the area in between has fallen through. I can't promise that that was the way it was constructed in the original embodiment, but that's the theory. Over there to the right is another cave. All these are numbered in the order in which manuscripts were found. Cave 5, some small fragments of things were found in that little sort of hump of a marl there. The reason we're digging in the marls, and you see our teams standing on top of the marls there, throwing their ladders, throwing their ropes, their climbing equipment, the radar ground scan boxes over the side, is because the theory of this expedition is that since Cave 4 was an artificially hollowed out cave within the marl, it is quite possible that some of the other marls might have been artificially hollowed out and just covered up for one reason or another. Erosion, mudslides, rain, debris, or they were purposely covered up. So 12 years ago, when we did the first ground scan of this plateau, California State University, Long Beach, under my direction, brought the equipment out from the Geophysical Survey System company of New Hampshire, the same company that's helping us sponsor to some extent our activities at the present time. In this expedition, using their upgraded gear, we found signatures of empty areas in several of those marls. We also found some signatures of empty areas over here. And in the last 2 years, under previous expeditions, we were able to dig a few out, and we did find pottery, mats, signs of habitation, nothing spectacular like manuscripts. So the radar has been working, and now we're trying to zero in to find this. According to our readers 14 years ago, we saw a huge empty area on one of the three adjoining fingers next to Cave 4. We're trying to identify exactly which that finger is. And we're trying to see if there's another cave like that. We're not pie-eyed optimists. We're not dreamers. We know the chances of finding anything are about 1%, if that. But we think no stone should be left unturned. If there is another cave like Cave 4, it would be like the motherlode of all motherlodes for Dead Sea Scroll documents. So it certainly is worth a little extra effort of the kind we are putting in here. And it's an interesting activity. A final comment. You see the bird just flew into that cave there, Cave 4. You see the entrance has been hit from the top, this from the side. I don't know what was there when Father DeVoe did his survey in 1952. But Father DeVoe, who was excavating this area here, missed that cave. Now, it is almost it is incredible to consider that he could have missed that cave, that an intelligent, sophisticated, civilized archaeologist could miss a cave like that. You could say that it was more covered up than it is now. But all the pictures I have seen have shown a direct hole there, and I think there was a hole there in 1952 when he was out here. Whether the hole from the top was as big, whether the front had been knocked off, which I doubt, but the hole from the side is on all pictures that I have seen. Now, it could have been smaller, but it certainly was a cave. He has said that he didn't see it. Other quotations that I have heard was he didn't think it was important. He didn't think there would be any scrolls down here. He thought they were all up in the limestone cliffs up there. Whatever the reason, he didn't send anyone in. He was paying Bedouin survey teams to do his work for him. You can see pictures of the fathers sitting in their tents, having their tea, doing their prayers, things like that. They were not a hands-on group. They sat in the European aristocratic upper-class way, enjoyed the fact that they were archaeologists in the field with cook and every other sort of amenity brought down to them, and they paid Bedouin work gangs to do the work for them. I'm not sure Bedouin work gangs always told the archaeologists the truth about what they found. In the end, the upshot was, 2 months after he finished his survey, the Bedouin found, in quotes, Cave 4, cleaned it all out. Everything went up on the Jerusalem market, and then the archaeologists came running down here again to check what they had left behind them, and lo and behold, they found Cave 4. It's a very suspicious and upsetting series of events. One of my students who first pointed this anomaly of the dating of when Cave 4 was found out to me, I hadn't realized this. He was very worried about it and wrote a paper about it. His name was Dennis Walker. That paper has since been published in Poland. But some people with darker ideas, and I'm not a darker idea person, I don't like to give these people that much credit for intelligence, with darker ideas, since the Bedouins worked in work gangs, and since they had set a fixed price for the per square centimeter purchases to, in their words, stop the black market, the Bedouins would go in these places, rip up the manuscripts, hand them out to each person who was working, and then each person would go up to Jerusalem and get his square centimeter price for his little piece of manuscript. The Bedouins had no interest in keeping a big manuscript. So it's quite possible that this policy and missing this cave contributed to the fact that the materials from Cave 4 are in a perfectly horrendous condition of preservation. That's not to say they weren't probably badly preserved in the first place. We have even indications in there of a sword, of a sword swipe. Perhaps a Roman soldier or some angry person with a sword went in there and did some flailing around before he got disgusted and left. But in any case, this missing Cave 4 was, in fact, by the archaeologists who followed the Bedouin everywhere, this was missing the biggest bonanza in Dead Sea Scrolls studies for a very odd, fairly incomprehensible reason.
Good. Okay.
Does that do anything?
Yes. don't know. She bought a shirt in the Okay, let's go. We are going this way.